In this video, we're going to talk about angles in standard position. And there's not a lot of kind of math and algebra to do, but there's a lot of kind of to explain. So before attempting this lesson, just make sure you know basic facts about angles, like what a 90-degree angle is, and smaller angles and bigger angles, and the difference between clockwise and counterclockwise. So clockwise going that way, counterclockwise going that way. All right, so we've talked about triangles before, so you learned about what an angle is. You know what a 90-degree angle is, 45-degree angle is. In those pictures of triangles, you can have your angles kind of looking like anything. All of these are the same angle. They're just going in different directions, but we want to get a more consistent picture. That way it's easier to talk about these angles. If they're the same every single time, they're a little bit easier to describe. So we're going to say an angle is in standard position, which is like the one we're going to expect it to be, if one side is the positive x-axis. So if I had my xy plane, I have an angle if one side is this positive x-axis and the other side can be anywhere. So that's an angle in standard position. This is an angle in standard position, and then this would not be in standard position because one of the sides is not the positive x-axis. All right, so now that the first side is always in the same place, we can create consistent angles. So a 45-degree angle is always going to look the same. 60-degree angle will always look the same. And what we do is we have our angle with our one side on the positive x-axis, we're going to rotate counterclockwise to get to the angle we want. So we rotate to the 60-degree angle here. This is the kind of only 60-degree angle that we're talking about. If we want to rotate a negative angle, and negative angles do make sense in the fact that now there's just an angle that's rotating clockwise. So this angle here will be negative 30 because I rotated clockwise to get to the other angle. All right, to help us further classify angles, we're going to talk about the quadrants of the XY plane. So if I think about the XY plane, all right, quad means 4, and you can see it breaks up into 4 equal parts. Well, equal parts, 4 parts. All right, in the top right here, we're going to call this quadrant 1. Y quadrant 1 being in the top right, because that's when X and Y are positive, which is kind of the best case scenario. We're going to start there. And then just like our angles, we're going to go counterclockwise. So that's quadrant 1. This is quadrant 2. Keep going counterclockwise. This is quadrant 3. And this is quadrant 4. And for some reason, I always use Roman numerals when I put the quadrants. I'm not going to be upset if you use just normal numerals. All right, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can also use those. I just put quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4. All right, what angles break up the quadrant? So if I think about my angle, I'm always starting here. And this is actually the 0-degree angle, because I haven't done anything at all. But if I go straight up from here, all right, that's a right angle, and we know that's 90 degrees. So the top, the kind of borderline between quadrant 1 and 2 is 90 degrees. From there, if I keep going, you see it's another right angle. So I do another 90 degrees. Well, 90 degrees plus another 90 means this line represents 180 degrees. And that makes sense because it's a straight line. If I do another 90 degrees, I'm going to be going straight down. So another 90 degrees is going to get me to 270. And if I go all the way around, I've done 4 90-degree angles. That's 360 degrees. So these are kind of the separating points of these different quadrants. And that's going to help me to identify what my angle is going to look like. All right, so these are the type of questions we're interested in this lesson. I'm going to give you an angle in degrees, and you want to kind of draw it and then identify which quadrant it's going to land in. So I'll always start with the XY plane. We already have one side of our angle. It's in standard position, so we always know we can just kind of draw one side. And then where's the other side of the angle going to be? This is where it's helpful to know those breaking points. This was 90, 180, 270, and 360. So 120, it can't be between 0 and 90 because 120 is bigger, but it can't be past 180. So it has to be between 90 and 180, and we don't need to be exact, but it's closer to 90 than 180. So this ends up being a 120-degree angle. All right, really, we're just figuring out where is this number between the other numbers, and that tells me that this is in quadrant 2, because it's up to the left. Again, quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so this is an angle in quadrant 2. All right, negative 15 degrees. going to start off. And the only difference between positive and negative, if I go this direction, that's a positive angle. And if I go this direction, clockwise, that's a negative angle. So I'm going to start with one side on the positive x-axis. And where's the other side going to go? I'm going to rotate clockwise 15 degrees. 15 degrees is not a lot, something like that. And that's going to tell me this is in quadrant 4. Right. So just important to remember that negatives, all that means is just rotating in the opposite direction. All the numbers kind of flip. So now this would be negative 90 down here. It would be negative 180, negative 270, and negative 360. So it's just kind of doing everything in reverse. All right, let's sketch 285. And we can always start off with one of our sides because it's in standard position. All right, 285 is bigger than 90, so it's not going to be in quadrant 1. It's bigger than 180, so it's not going to be in quadrant 2. And it's bigger than 270, so it's not going to be in quadrant 3. It's gone past all of these markers, which means this is where 285 is. So this angle here is 285 degrees, and that puts it in quadrant 4. All right, so you're really just saying 285 is between 270 and 360. So as long as you know these 4 numbers, you can see it's in quadrant 4. All right, negative 190. All right, we're going in the negative direction, so we're going to rotate clockwise. So this is negative 90, negative 180, negative 270, negative 360. And negative 190 is between 180 and 270. It's pretty close to 180, so it looks something like this. So I rotated from my starting point to over there. That's negative 190 degrees, and that's in quadrant 2. All right, so go ahead and do this on your own. All right, you're trying to sketch 210 degrees. All right, I'll show you the answer in 3, 2, 1. 210 looks like that. All right, it's bigger than 180, but smaller than 270, so it ends up in quadrant 3. All right, so go ahead and practice this. Just get comfortable with knowing where your angles are, especially those negative angles, because you're kind of thinking about it in reverse. It's a little bit more complicated. All right, but if you know that 90, 180, 270, 360, all right, those are your border points. Basically, you're seeing is the number between there. So if it's 130, it's between those. If it's 260, it's between those. 350, it's there. All right, so just knowing where it is between those numbers will help you figure out the quadrant.